Valley Christian friends and family. This is Pastor Martin. We're here with another midweek message. Today we're going to be covering questions concerning the rapture. I'm joined today with Brother Jerry Mongello.
How you doing?
And as I said, we're going to be answering some questions. I just do, over the course of the next few weeks, we have enough questions that it's going to take us several weeks to answer these questions and do them due diligence, which I feel is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if people are going to answer questions, then we need to, if they're going to ask questions, we need to answer them biblically, and we need to do them justice. As I said when we began this Rapture series on our midweek message, the key when we discuss the rapture is to actually understand the issue. Now, when we did a series on Wednesday nights, that was, how long was that? 10, 11 months, a year?
At least, yes.
Yeah, a long time. One of these days on our midweek, I'm going to bring in the list of topics that we covered just so that we would understand the rapture. Because, in my opinion, the very last question you answer is, when does the rapture occur? Because if you understand what the Bible has to say about the topic, by the time you get to when, it's kind of self-explanatory. So, over the next few weeks, we will answer questions of when. There are a lot of questions on our plate. Today, we're going to cover one comment that was made and answer one question. Very important. So the comment that I would like to start with was in regards to the rapture, and I quote, "It's a claim about a future event that cannot be verified until after it happens. And the claim was not made by Jesus." So we're going to have a two-part answer because this is a two-part comment. The first part, it's a claim about a future event that cannot be verified until after it happens. And this isn't the first time I've heard this. When we speak of prophecy, when we speak of God declaring the end from the beginning, quite often we're told, well, you can't believe it until after it happens. And once I see it, then I'll believe it. Well, this speaks to the very nature and the definition of what faith is. If we only believe after God does something, then it's not faith, it's sight. See, the Bible says in Hebrews 11, "By faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God." Get that. Before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. When we're discussing the rapture of the church, I believe it's going to be written of us the same way. Before God took us, we had this testimony that we pleased God.
Can I say something? The comment is disturbing in this fact. If you were talking about Nostradamus, who his track record was some prophecies were fulfilled and some prophecies wasn't fulfilled. If you were talking about some palm hand reader, they have no rate. But God, you can go through the Bible and you can test when God said this was going to happen. When God said 150 years before Cyrus was born that Cyrus was going to leave it, allow his people to go back and even finance it, and it happened.
By name.
By name.
By
He
name.
says, "I call you by name." You know, when God said when Jesus was going to ride in on the donkey and gave the Pacific day, it happened. God is 100% for 100%. That He doesn't give us blind. We don't have blind faith,
Right.
But all the miracles. When God said that Israel would become a nation again in one day after 2,000 years from Isaiah, it happened. And we can see that. And to say, and the Word does say, I know you're going to get into that, the Word does say and does talk about the rapture, and that we're not appointed to wrath. So God is going to make it happen.
Yes. See, something we need to be aware of is that God doesn't give us prophecy so that we can rub our hands on a crystal ball like some type of party trick and amaze our friends with being able to predict the future. That is not the purpose of prophecy. The purpose of prophecy is multifold. Number one, to show us the heart of God. God wants to show his heart and his intentions to his creation. The God who created us did not create us and throw us into a dark hole. Say, fend for yourself. The God who created us is honest enough to tell us when we fail and tell us what the consequences of that failure are. Now, as we spoke about Enoch, I've always believed is a type of the rapture of the church.
Yes.
He was taken out before the flood because he pleased God. The church will be removed because we please God. Does that mean we're perfect?
No.
What is it we do to please God?
Faith. Without
Faith.
faith, it's impossible to please God.
Without
Our
faith.
faith in Jesus Christ and of his appearing.
That's right. It's our faith. As we continue in Hebrews, without faith it's impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. God is not looking for those who will say, I'll believe in God when he shows himself to me. And I'm going to be blunt. As we're going through the book of Revelation, it's incredibly clear that there are an overwhelming majority of people on the earth during this horrible time called the tribulation who do know that it's God's wrath that's being poured out, who have seen God in action, who do understand that these are the plagues that God has sent and he has power over, and they still refuse to repent and believe. So if your position is, and I want to say this with concern and diligence here, if your position is that I won't believe in God unless he shows himself to me, I would encourage you to get a Bible, to read the Gospel of John, to read the Gospel of Matthew, to read Proverbs, and understand that the God who created you is stretching his arms out to you. He's calling you. He died for you on a cross, not so that he could crush you, but so that he could save you. The second, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another point there is people have seen miracle after miracle. The Jewish people are a prime example. God led them out of Egypt as he prophesied he would. Every plague, he told them that Pharaoh was going to harden his heart, and Pharaoh hardened his heart, and eventually God hardened his heart. And then they send in 12 people, one from each tribe of Israel, into the promised land that God said he was going to give them. And there was a lack of faith by the 10 that caused them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Now, I know we're going to get into that with numbers because of one of the comments that were there, but faith is believing in the unseen thing. But we have a proven track record with God all the way through. I'm sorry again.
No, that's good. And I believe you mentioned a couple of weeks ago when you were preaching that, and we've mentioned it numerous times over the years, we don't believe in a vain faith. We don't believe in a possibly resurrected, risen Jesus Christ. At one point, Paul wrote of the gospel, of whom more than 500 people had seen the Lord alive. And the comment was, most of whom are still with us, go ask him. You know, there was over 500 people who saw Jesus Christ after the resurrection in person, and Paul encouraged those people, encouraged his readers, go ask them.
But he didn't go to the unbeliever.
That's right.
Because the unbeliever is still going to be the unbeliever.
Right.
And Abraham prophesied in that in, was it Luke 16? Even if one comes back from the dead, they won't believe.
That's right. They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them, for if they won't hear Moses and the prophets, they will not believe though one rise from the dead. It's a hard issue. Now, the second part of this comment was that this claim was not made by Jesus in regard to the rapture. In John 14:1 through 3, Jesus, speaking to his disciples, said, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. We're clearly told, then Jesus, speaking to his disciples, said. This is out of Jesus' mouth. So yes, Jesus made that claim. Let's talk very briefly, because we do have to get to another question. Very briefly, and it's illustrated right here in this passage, the difference between the rapture of the church and the second advent. So for those of you who haven't been with our studies or are unfamiliar with the topic, the second advent is where Jesus returns to the earth, puts his boots on the ground, so to speak, and assumes control of the world that he created. He comes to where man is and assumes control. The rapture is different. That Jesus said here in John, if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be. It's entirely different. The rapture of the church, Jesus is coming to take the church to be with him where he's at. The second advent, Jesus returns to the earth where man is and assumes control.
And comes to save the Jews from annihilation.
Exactly.
Also in 1 Thessalonians 4, starting in verse 13, it says, but I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. For this we say by the word of the Lord. Not by Paul's word, but by the word of the Lord. When Paul was in Arabia for 3 years being taught by Jesus, Jesus gave him these revelations. So Jesus did talk about the rapture, and this passage is talking about the rapture.
Amen. So let's move on to our first question. This is a very serious question. It says, my grandchildren want to know if they will ascend in the rapture. They are ages 13 and under. That's a very serious question, and we have a lot of concerns over our children and our grandchildren. I want to start with what Paul writes in Romans chapter 7, verse 9. He said, I was alive once without the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. Now that word without means outside, apart from, outside of. Paul was not talking about physical life here. Paul was talking about accountability. Prior to understanding the law, he was alive spiritually. We can't say it's because he hadn't heard the law before. I have heard some people say, well, Paul was talking about, at some point he heard the law later in life. That's not accurate. He was raised in a Jewish home. He was raised in a Jewish culture. The law was everywhere.
He was taught as a Pharisee.
Taught as a Pharisee of Pharisees, taught by Gamaliel, and they started that at a young age. So Paul isn't talking about the first time he heard the Bible or heard the law. Paul is speaking about accountability, when he would and would not be held accountable. We call this the age of accountability. An infant or a child or the mentally handicapped who are not capable of understanding right, wrong, the consequences of right and wrong. They're not capable of understanding the gospel and salvation. In other words, the law. They aren't capable of comprehending it, will not be held accountable to it. As such, children under the age of accountability will ascend in the rapture with the rest of us who believe in Jesus Christ.
The age of accountability is not spelled out in the Word of God.
That's correct.
There's some references, and there was a time that God held a certain group of Israelites accountable from the age of 20 and up, and the ones from the age of 19 and below were not held accountable and were able to go into the promised land. But that was specifically for the Hebrews, and because they were military ready, and they were going to go in and take the promised land.
Well, let's look at that. I actually had a reference to that here on my notes.
14, 26.
Yeah, Numbers 14. I'd encourage you, parents, the grandmother who asked this question, go read Numbers chapter 14 in entirety. As you said, some people say that according to Numbers 14, the age of accountability is 20, right at 20. Well, let's read the passage here. In Numbers 14, we're going to look at beginning of verse 27. How long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness, all of you who were numbered according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above. Except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness. The little ones, when you go back and you look at the original language, the little one is speaking of infants, toddlers, the unlearned, the unaccountable. What's interesting is he's speaking of those who are 19 and younger.
Yes.
What we're seeing here in this God's anger in Numbers chapter 14 is, as you mentioned, the 12 spies go into the promised land. They come back, 10 of them bring an evil report. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, say it's a good land. It's a land of plenty. The Lord is sending us in. We can take them. The Lord will be with us. He'll fight the battle. But these 10 stir up the entire nation to murmur against God and murmur against Moses. And so, as you read further back in the chapter, we didn't get to, all of those, God goes tribe by tribe, and he lists all of the tribes, how many men aged 20 years and up were numbered for battle, were numbered for war. They were, if you would, conscribed into the army. And the Lord had listed these by number, and X amount of thousands of men above the age of 20 from the tribe of Reuben.
Up to the age of 50, I believe.
Up to the age of 50. So these men were numbered, they were prepared, they were enlisted, if you will. And remember, they were willing. It wasn't until they got the news from the 10 spies who stirred them up that they rebelled. So what we're seeing is that those in the army, those in God's kingdom, who had said they were willing, suddenly turned, lost their faith in God, and rebelled.
And it wasn't because they didn't know that God was able to deliver them.
That's
and
right.
to deliver the land into their hands.
Mm-hmm.
They just witnessed fantastic miracles in the hand of God. You know, a pillar of fire, smoke at night, you know, parting the Red Sea.
Right. All the plagues of Egypt. I mean, God had showed his hand in a mighty way to bring them out of Egypt and to bring them to this land that he had promised. And now, by refusing to go in, they were in open rebellion. Now, if we said that this is a hard and fast principle of the age of accountability, 19 and under, I think we would be remiss. And one of the biggest reasons I say that is because the Bible doesn't tell us that. And number 2, I know who I was when I was 19 years old. When I was 19, I was completely capable of understanding the gospel. I was entirely capable of being held accountable for knowing right, for knowing wrong, for knowing who Jesus was. Now, I wasn't walking with him then. So even though I professed to be a believer as a child, I had run far, far away. And I know that at 19, I was not a babe who couldn't understand.
But we also know, even though there's not a hardened and fast age, but God doesn't punish the innocent.
Right.
And we believe that if a child dies from a miscarriage, that child is with the Lord. If a child is aborted, that child is with the Lord. If a child is born and has a mishap, has an illness, has an accident, and dies, and is under the age of accountability, that child is with the Lord.
I believe that.
And that's the nature of God.
That is that. There's a couple of examples. I want to use one of King David. As we all know, King David, he slipped numerous times. And one of those grievous sins that he committed against the Lord was to have an adulterous affair with Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. He even had Uriah killed so that he wouldn't be found out in having this affair where Uriah's wife got pregnant during this affair. And so in 2 Samuel chapter 12, we see that the child had become sick. The Lord had told King David through the prophet that David wouldn't die from this sin, the Lord wouldn't smite him, but that the child would become ill and die. And so David went into prayer and fasting on the hope that the Lord would save the child. So let's pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 18. Then on the seventh day it came to pass that the child died, and the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, indeed, while the child was alive, we spoke to him, and he would not heed our voice. How can we tell him that the child is dead? He may do some harm. Now, for the uninitiated, King David was a man of war. What they're saying is, I don't want to be the one to tell King David his son died. He just may kill the messenger. They were afraid for their safety. When David saw that his servants were whispering, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said to his servants, is the child dead? And they said, he is dead. So David arose from the ground, washed and anointed himself, changed his clothes, and went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and when he requested, they set food before him, and he ate. And his servants were surprised, because the next verse says, then his servant said to him, what is this you've done? You fasted and wept for the child while he was alive, but when the child died, you arose and ate food. And he said, while the child was alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, who can tell whether or not the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Now, if you think about that, if you think about where this child came from an adulterous relationship that resulted in murder, and the child died, David clearly knew that that child was waiting for him in heaven. And I believe that's the same with every aborted child. I believe it's the same with the mentally incapable. Children under the age of accountability are not going to be held accountable. Just as David's child wasn't held accountable for David's sin, children under the age of accountability will not be held accountable for their parents' sin. You agree?
Yes, I agree. Some people believe that there has to be a believer in the family in order for the child to be raptured, and if the child dies, to go to heaven. And they use 1 Corinthians 7:14 as the proof text. I'm going to say right up front, I don't believe it's talking about that. I believe it's talking about, let's read it. 1 Corinthians 7:14. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy, set apart. Sanctified is set apart also. I believe it's almost the story of Timothy. Timothy had an unbelieving father, but he had a believing mother and a grandmother.
Right.
And due to their loyalty and devotion to God, Timothy comes to the Lord. And I believe that's what happens to children that have a believing parent. I don't believe we can say that only the children that have a believing parent will go up in the rapture. It's just like saying that if I'm more spiritual than you, I'm going up in the rapture. And when we studied, we did a whole study on that. And the less mature Christian is not going up in the rapture.
All right.
Once again, I think God, we look at the attributes of God, and God is love, and he is just and holy. And part of him being just is that he doesn't punish the innocent.
Amen. You know, there's another example I'd like to look at. It's an unusual one. Job chapter 42. Now, to those of you familiar with Job's story, in the opening chapter of Job, there was a day when the sons of God gathered, appointed day where they were gathered together before God to give an account. And God is bragging on his servant Job to Satan. He said, he asked Satan, where you been? Well, from roaming to and fro throughout the earth. And God said, have you observed my servant Job? Now, you and I have laughed about this, so I'm telling you guys out there to enjoy it. I have often thought, I hope the Lord doesn't say, have you ever considered my servant Martin?
I think he has.
I think he has. There have been a few days. So the net result was Satan basically told God that the only reason Job served him, the only reason he was the most righteous man, was because God gave him his wants and needs, material. And so Satan said, I can't touch him because you put a hedge around him. So anyway, I don't want to go through all that. But the book of Job is a long story of Job retaining his faithfulness in God when he suffered more than anyone else ever has except for Jesus Christ. In chapter 42, as it's wrapping up, funny story, when it gets to the end, Job has some friends who are making his suffering worse, accusing him of being sinful even though he wasn't. And at the end of the day, the Lord showed up and he told to Job who is this who darkens counsel with words without wisdom? And he said that Job should sacrifice for his friends who were in error. And so he did that. And beginning in chapter 42, verse 10. And the Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. If you're into circling or marking or highlighting your Bible, mark that. He gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then all of his brothers, all of his sisters, all of those who had been his acquaintances before came to him and ate food with him in his house, and they consoled him and comforted him for all the adversary that the Lord had brought upon him. Each one gave him a piece of silver and each a ring of gold. Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. Now if you go back to the beginning of the book of Job, this is exactly twice what he had when he started. He lost everything at the beginning. And it says that the Lord restored twice what he had. And then notice verse 13. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. But he started with 7 sons and 3 daughters. The Lord didn't give him 14 sons and 6 daughters.
Because he's trying to give him a blessing.
Because he's trying to give him a blessing. But the point we see in that, he didn't lose the first 7 sons and 3 daughters. He lost the camel and the sheep and the oxen because they're not waiting for him in heaven. But his sons and his daughters are. And they were grown. Mm-hmm. In fact, he sacrificed for them daily in case they had done something that they were unaware of. So God is not looking for a reason to destroy us or our children.
I think we have to mention that we're not talking about universalism.
No, we're not.
We're talking about children that aren't at the age to be able to make a decision.
Correct.
And in the case of Job's kids, he followed the ritual by sacrificing for them. He put the covering over them. He did it daily because he was worried about his children.
All right. Absolutely. We are not talking about those who reject Jesus, knowingly reject Christ as Lord and Savior. We're talking about those who don't understand yet, under the age of accountability. I want to talk a little bit about general knowledge versus specific knowledge. Quite often we're asked questions that don't have a chapter verse that specifically answers that question. This is one of those. Will children be in the rapture? We have some indications. We have some possibilities. But we don't have a specific chapter verse that says, yes, children under this age. What we do have is general knowledge. See, there's two types of biblical revelation. There's two types of biblical information. There is specific information, and you and I were talking earlier about this. We don't need to look exhaustively through the scriptures to ascertain should we or should we not commit adultery. One verse is enough. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That is specific revelation. General knowledge would be something like on this question. Do we know, is the Lord just? Is he not just? I'm going to read one general revelation that answers a lot of questions. 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. This is general knowledge that applies in every situation. You cannot find a single verse in Scripture that would come into conflict with the general. So I have a feeling that I'm babbling about this. You can't find specific hidden scriptures that fly in the face of known truth. The known truth is that God is not willing that any should perish. The known truth is that God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked, right? So that's a general known truth. And when he's not willing that any should perish and that he is a just God, then we need to understand that his heart is for salvation. And he's a just God and a loving God.
Right. And look how many years he's been warning humanity about the end and when the end was going to come. And it's just like with Israel. He would warn them for 400 years that if you continue to do what you're doing, I'm going to bring judgment on you. And when they wouldn't stop, judgment finally came. But it didn't just hit them all of a sudden. You can see it even in the plagues in Revelation. You can see how he starts off gradually trying to warn humanity. Look, it's going to get worse. It's 1/3 of humanity dies in this set of plagues, and then there's a fourth, and then there's, 1/3 of the ocean is turned to blood. Then the whole ocean is turned to blood. Each time he's trying to warn humanity to turn to Jesus Christ.
I want to read something that Jesus said in Matthew 18. Lengthy bit of scripture here. Matthew 18, we're going to read verses 1 through 14. At that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Then Jesus called a little child to him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. I want you to take note here. It doesn't say that Jesus went and found a child of a believer. It doesn't say Jesus found a child of a nobleman. It says Jesus took a child and sat in front of them. Okay, so we continue in verse 5. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses. For offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom offenses come. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It's better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet be cast into the everlasting fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It's better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire. Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. This is one of those general revelations that overcomes everything. The Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. And he continues, What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? And if he should find it, assuredly I say to you, he rejoices more over that one sheep than over the 99 who did not go astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. And there's several things in view here. Jesus is talking figuratively about those who believe in him must come as a little child, but he's also talking about little children. That's right.
And warning people not to cause one of those little children to sin. I believe that deals with child abuse. I believe that deals with abortion. And it's funny that we're living in a time when we have a whole group of people, political parties, that want to be able to take the life of little children, even after they're born. And it's just mind-boggling. It really is. And yeah, you're right, Martin. This verse is one of those verses that's general knowledge. Jesus speaks about children. Suffer the little children to come unto me. You know, and that's how we can say with assurance and with faith that if there is a rapture, the children are going to go.
I believe that. And that verse 14, that every time I read through this passage, particularly viewing it with children, this verse just continues to ring. Even so, it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Now, we've made mention several times in the past few months of the abortion rate in the United States and around the world, and specifically in America, that since Roe versus Wade, here in our nation, we believe there's over 70 million little ones from Matthew 18, verse 14, that have perished. Do you think that was God's desire?
No.
No. It was man's rebellion. It was sin.
You know, there's another thing that struck me when I read the grandmother's question. And her grandchildren are questioning the rapture and questioning whether they're going, which is a good thing.
Yes.
You know, we're instructed as parents and as grandparents, we're instructed in the Old Testament and the New Testament to train up our children. You know, so when they get older, they won't go away. We should be bringing the Lord to our children. It's the duty of every parent and every grandparent to share the Lord with them.
As you had mentioned about Timothy, it was his grandmother Eunice.
That's right.
And his mother who shared the gospel with him.
And anyone that's ever dealt with little children know that God has put in their hearts, if not a knowledge, they know. And you don't have to convince them. Their faith is strong. Mention Jesus' name and watch a little child light up. It's almost like God has conditioned them.
Yes.
And we should be talking to them.
Amen.
And so we wouldn't have to worry. Are they going or aren't they going? If they accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, we know that they're all going.
I would encourage you this, Grandma. If your grandchildren are articulate enough or to the point where they can talk enough to ask you about the rapture, I'm assuming you have also given them the gospel. If you haven't, start with that. If you haven't shared Jesus with them, then start right there. If they're asking you about, are you going in the rapture, and you're not certain where they stand, are they under the age of accountability? Are they over? It's a very simple question. You can ask your grandkids, well, do you want to go? And do you love Jesus? If they're under the age of accountability, they're probably going to say yes. If they're over the age of accountability, that opens the door to present the gospel and bring them to a point of decision. So share that with them and just ask them, do you want to go? Do you want to go in the rapture? You know, Jesus said, any who call on me, I will in no wise turn them away. Man. So I'm encouraged that you have grandchildren who are asking you these questions. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, just ask them, what do you want to go? And do you love Jesus? It's a good starting point. Do you have any other advice?
No, I think that covers it.
I think that covers it. Well, as I mentioned, over the next coming weeks, we're going to answer some biblically answer some questions that have been discussed for many centuries. We're going to discuss when the rapture might occur. We might discuss what the condition of the believers are who are with the Lord now, who are returning with him. Do we have bodies? Do we don't? Do we sit on clouds with harps as some ethereal? So I think it's going to be fun. I've been very encouraged by the questions we have had, the interaction with our congregation and those without. It's been fun. So I expect over the next 3 weeks, if you keep asking questions, we'll keep answering them. All right? Anything else?
No.
Well, then I encourage you to join us 10 a.m. this Sunday as we continue through the book of Revelation. God bless. This is Pastor